I hear a lot of people saying things like life is a gift. Yeah, life is a gift in the sense that it's something that you didn't ask for that someone else gave you. But when people say life is a gift, they're implying that it's a good gift. An ugly sweater is a gift. Doesn't mean you want to wear that motherfucker. You know? Life is a gift. You're wasting your potential. What the fuck does that mean? You're wasting your potential. So there's a lot of assumptions in that. Assuming that, first of all, you asked to live, you asked to exist, you're like your existence, and you want to live up, or that you should live up to whatever arbitrary notion of potential that they've imbued on you. To even break down, let's break down that notion of potential. You're saying that this person has the capability to do something and implying that there's another group of people that don't have that capability. But where does that capability come from? Where does that come from? Their genetics. So that's an interesting notion that you're saying that this person should live up to their potential, their genetic potential, which is another thing that they didn't earn. It's something that you would call a gift. So I'm just trying to figure out where this notion of every man is born equal comes from. Where does it come from? Because it's like people talking on both sides of their mouth. On one hand, they're saying every man is created equal. On the other hand, they're saying there's genetic determinism. Living up to your potential. Okay. They say you're going around telling people that because they didn't become a successful business person that they've failed to reach their potential. They didn't live up to their potential. They didn't become a professional athlete, that they didn't live up to their potential. You're saying that they had an aptitude that was either disadvantaged or advantaged compared to the rest of the people, rest of the population. But there's nothing that they did to earn that. There's not, like, if you take two people, they do the same amount of work, they put the same amount of effort in, one of them's going to be better than the other. And it's nothing that the other person could have done, because it's their genetic aptitude. It's kind of like, when you use sports, for example, like, there was other guys on LeBron James' basketball team. They put in the same amount of hours. They were in the gym. But they didn't come close to making it to the NBA. They didn't come close to making it to a D1 college. They didn't come close to even going to the next level at any form. Some people, they put the same work in. They didn't make the high school team. They didn't make the varsity team. They probably didn't make the JV team. But it's because of genetic aptitude that LeBron James succeeded in basketball. I'm not denying whether or not the guy put in hard work. Just using that as an example of the hypocrisy of society, going around admonishing people for not living up to some vague notion of potential, as if it isn't wholly genetically determined. And I'm not saying this as, I'm not trying to be a defeatist. I'm not trying to say to not put in hard work. And that may or may not be the case, but you have to, that would be an individual decision. But it's just one of those things where if you really break it down logically and rationally, it just doesn't really make much sense. It's kind of like, there's people that saying, you should live your life how you want to live it, and be grateful for what you have and all these sorts of things. Then on the other hand, they're saying that life is a game and there's winners and losers, because that's what you say. Like it's one thing when like you're trying to virtue signal and you're trying to seem like a good person. You see all these vague cliches and glittering generalities to try to make yourself seem like a good person. But then in your regular everyday life, you say things like, "Oh, that guy's a loser. That guy's a bum. He's a nobody." So let's break down the language in which you use. See, I like doing that because language has a specific usage, and when you dissect what people say and you dissect the meaning of each word in the context of how those words are used together, you can discover what that person actually means when they're saying these things. So when you say somebody is a loser, you're implying that there's a game in which there's a zero-sum game, which there's winners and losers. Say that guy's a loser. What are the rules of the game? Usually when they call somebody a loser, that person is usually poor or broke. Meaning they don't have a lot of money. So one part of the game, one objective of the game apparently is making money, making a lot of money. And then the other one apparently is being famous, having a lot of people know who you are, at least on the surface level. They don't have to actually, know you on an intimate, personal level, but having a lot of people aware of your existence. Because when they say, "Oh, this guy's a nobody," all right, or "that guy fell off," they're meaning the guy's not famous. A lot of people aren't up to date and interested in that person's existence or what they have going on in their lives. So you are saying that there's an objective and life is a game. But these things, as if these things don't have a genetic basis. So you're saying that if you're broke and not famous, you're a loser. Okay. There's a lot of cognitive biases that people use when they try to give advice or try to describe occurrences and phenomena. One, for example, being survivorship bias. When a person succeeds at something and then they describe what they did post hoc and try to extrapolate that as the exclusive reason why they succeeded as opposed to everyone else, and as if that's the limiting factor in their success, while ignoring the other factors that were out of their hands, out of their control, and are out of other people's control that influence and factor into their success. Example, like I said, let's take, basketball, right? A basketball player, say like LeBron James or any one of the other basketball players, it's like the other people that put in the same work, put in the same hours, same amount of shots. They had trainers, everything, right? But one of those guys is 5'4", laying bricks. The other guy is a billionaire from playing sports. He's a billionaire from chasing a ball, playing a children's game. So you're going to sit here and say that the limiting factor between those two occurrences is that one simply worked harder? Whether or not that is the case, you can't say that that is the only case, the only factor, and the overwhelming factor. One guy just happened to be 6'8". I'm not even going to begin to list the percentile of human beings in that height, at that height. I'm not even going to begin to describe that because you already know. One guy just happened to be 6'8". How many fucking 6'8" guys have you seen? Have you even seen in your lifetime? Right? So survivorship bias, like the quote unquote successful businessman, successful business person. Yeah, they did this. They were up for working 12-hour days, as if there aren't other millions of people working 12 hours or more a day. They were doing this, 100 calls a day, whatever. And then their uncle, who was a veteran in that whatever field they were successful in, just happened to give them a small loan of $1 million. Their dad just happened to give them a small loan of $1 million. Their dad gave them the job, gave them the position. And then from there, they did some shit, became, one of those sorts of things. Like, you're going to sit here and say that the limiting factor was that the guy worked harder, or that the guy's more intelligent, or it just doesn't factor. It just doesn't. I don't see the correlation. It's just a coincidence that the guy's 6'8". It's just a coincidence that the guy's father was a billionaire. It's just a coincidence that the guy was a psychopath. It's just a coincidence, all of these things. I mean, when people, and you know what? To be fair, when people use these types of, hustle culture and toxic positivity, maybe some of them do mean good. Maybe not all of them are nefarious in their intent. But it's still, the effect is still what it is. It's effectively gaslighting people into discrediting genetic determinism for the phenomena in which we see in the world. Another example of survivorship bias is when a guy who's 6'5", buff, with a chiseled jawline expresses romantic interest in someone. It's called flirting. If a 5'4", obese, balding guy expresses romantic interest in someone, it's called sexual harassment. You know, and the guy that was successful in that endeavor would be like, just be confident, bruh. When no amount of confidence would make up for the apparent lack of physical attractiveness. In fact, that compensation for confidence may be a negative. They'll make fun of the guy, they'll say something like, who does he think he is? Or, you know, stay in your place, or you're not in my league, I'm out of your league. And which brings me to another point in this notion of genetic determinism, which is when, it's almost as if people have a biological, subconscious predisposition to kind of put people in their genetic places, kind of categorize people in, these genetic categories, like the genetic superior, the genetic inferior. Let me give you an example. Have you ever heard someone say, this person is an overachiever? That he overachieved. What do they mean by that? That's the thing. When people say things like that, the definition is baked into the language. So let's break that down. You're saying this person overachieved, which would disagree with the hard work equals success meritocracy notion. Because if how can you overachieve if they put in the requisite work to get the desired result? That just means they worked hard and got successful. But you're saying this person overachieved, meaning you're implying that there is some underlying genetic ceiling, and you're saying that this person surpassed that genetic ceiling or that genetic baseline where there's, a bell curve of, this person has their genetics, right? And there's a bell curve, and on either side of that bell curve, that's the range of which that person could achieve, right? So you're saying that person is on the higher end of their specific genetically determined bell curve, which is why you're calling that person an overachiever. Now the people, they might not be thinking all of that stuff subconsciously or consciously, but it is kind of built into the language. It's funny how if you take what people say when they're virtue signaling, and then you take what they say in a colloquial environment, and you extrapolate and you break down what are they actually saying. Use another example. The notion of hard work equals success, meritocracy, what you put in is what you get out. Every person is created equal. All right, let's take another example from sports, right? Ball chasing. In that realm, people actually use hard work as a pejorative. When they describe a good player, they'll be like, this guy's a freak. They'll say he's a genetic freak. He's a genetic specimen, right? But when a guy isn't a great player, they'll say he's a hustle player. Oh, he's a hustle player. He's a hard worker. He's not that guy. And what they mean by that, they mean this person doesn't have the genetic gifts. They're saying that the only reason that this person even has a shot to even have a transient opportunity to play in the league at a high level, right, is that he worked so hard that he barely reached his genetic ceiling, which is why they call him an overachiever. They'll look at him as like, oh, this guy, an inspiration, kind of like, how people look at, kind of like a make-a-wish type of thing. But they'll say that about a guy who worked hard to, become a professional athlete or whatever, right? But they won't give him that same respect because, again, it's that kind of inherent, innate biological predisposition to kind of categorize people in these genetic, this genetic hierarchy. Well, he's not a freak. He's never going to be the best. He's never going to be the best of all time. He's never going to be the best in the league. He's never going to be on that level. He's just a hard worker. He's just a hustle player. But if the notion of meritocracy was correct, you would be praising the guy for being a hustle player, because hustling, that would mean that he's putting in the work and the effort to be great, to be successful. But at the high levels, you actually admonish, you use it as an insult, you damn them with a faint praise. Oh, he's a hustle player. He's a hard worker. On the surface, that sounds like a compliment, but it's a backhanded compliment. It's actually an insult. You're insulting him without overtly insulting him. This is interesting. Kind of like when they call a sports player a bust. What they're really saying is that this person on the surface had the genetic gifts, but they didn't live up to their genetically determined potential. They were on the lower end of their specific bell curve for genetic aptitude. But nonetheless, they're saying this guy had a genetic aptitude based on his genetics, his genetic ability, which is he didn't work hard. He had no control over it, is what I'm saying. Because if a person without the genetic gifts had the same outcome as the person with the genetic gifts, you wouldn't say he's a bust. You would just say, well, you wouldn't even speak about it. Like it wouldn't be a thing. It'd just be, well, of course, that guy, he doesn't have the genetics for that. He's gonna, it's gonna be a bricklayer, or, some job that would be deemed, less than or not be praised within society.